Part two of our recap of the state championships is here. We are live with Friday Night Drive here on a Thursday, which makes no sense, but none of this has made any sense in the last 2 weeks or so. Steve Soucie, Matt Rodewald, we are tired of football. Is that a fair way to say it? Tired of it?
A little tired of the week and the way that it broke down, to be honest with you. You get used to that routine of having, Friday, Saturday, and then you take a little pause. And then it was just all of the chaos of having, Saturday's games, thinking you're going to have them, amping up for that 2 days of 8 games in those 2 days, then finding out on Friday that you're not having the Saturday games, not knowing when the Saturday games were going to be played, then stringing those 4 remaining games over 2 different days at 2 different sites at diametrically different places amongst the state. It made for what, I think, in my opinion, I've been doing state final weekends for 30 years now, easily the weirdest one I've ever experienced.
Yes. Yeah, that's a safe bet for sure. And, for you and I, with the recent memory of COVID hitting us, it's just one of those, I had to do the calculation as somebody said, well, it's unprecedented playing football in December. I'm like, that's the least of my concerns compared to what we've had to do before. We had football practice in February. We had games in March, April. We had games did we have games in May? I don't even know at this point when you look back. So what was December? Let's just add another month to the calendar there. That was no big deal for me, but it was certainly amusing. And then, the amazing thing is that the weather just hasn't let up ever since. It's been, you get into the snowy cold pattern and, we're used to it in the wintertime, but if you were looking for a break, you didn't get it, which is why you had to get this thing done. You know what's coming Saturday? 2 to 5 inches more. Yeah. So it's not like waiting the weekend would have made any sense.
Right.
Just, gathering the last few days. And I say tired of football. No, we love football, but I think everyone's ready for a season to end. At some point, you just get there. And I can tell you how many times I've been on state telecasts where I'm like, all right, I'm done with this season. I'm not talking just football. I'm talking basketball. I'm talking volleyball, soccer, all of those. There have been moments where you're just like, it's time for it to end. Every coach goes through it. They'll lie to you when they say they don't. They do too. And I think there was an element where it was like, all right, finish this up. Let's go. We've got some other things we want to get accomplished. And you and I, we talk of schedules and hypotheticals all the time. It's kind of like we got into GM mode, I think, real quick. Where it's like, you want to skip the season of the video game so you can get to the GM part. There's an element to that too, with schedules and things like that. So it was an interesting week for sure. You and I are going to talk a little more about this here. We're going to break down each game here, these next few minutes here. We're not going to go too long here. Just keep it brief and simple and short. And the results, not terribly surprising for me. That includes 6A. We'll get to that. But just your overall thoughts. I'll start here just to talk about my experience being there at the 7A game this week. I didn't get a chance to stay for 8A. Had it, one eye on it, one eye on a basketball court, blowing the whistle and all. But I was down there in the sidelines for 7A with St. Rita and Brother Rice. 2 years ago, I called them playing each other in week 9 of the regular season on television. So it's interesting to see it in that perspective. It was a smaller crowd. You just knew it. You knew it would be that way. But it was an excitable crowd. We had a shirtless dude that caught a little TV attention. It was a little weird, but he was into it. And God bless him for it. No, literally. The same thing.
A little was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
Yeah, I would say so.
A little weird.
It was interesting, but everybody on the benches knew it. They went, who's that guy?
Yeah.
Even the players, especially those freshmen, sophomores that know they're not getting in, they're kind of going, looking around and seeing all this, go, that guy, I don't know about that. So it was a fascinating. Brother Rice had everybody dressed up as elves, all their students. Didn't really. Some of it was hard to kind of capture on television because of the fact that at Northern Illinois, all the fans were on the near side, which made sense. You're not clearing 2 sides. Right. It's a lot of snow. And, volunteers, Sean Frazier, hats off to him. Peter Goff, hats off to him. And the DeKalb football team was out there, I know, shoveling snow and trying to get all that out of there. So, and a host of others as well. To put on an event like that, to give it the state finals gravitas as best you can under the circumstances we saw it, you got the normal experience going back down there for the 5A, 6A. What was your take for both venues and just how they handled it? I thought everyone did the best they could to just get it going, get it as high level as possible, to feel the intensity as best you can, and then to kind of give it its proper send off.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of felt like a weird situation. You couldn't get your head really wrapped around it. I looked down on Tuesday night and was like, usually when you get down to the state finals, if you're just kind of like wandering around, like, down in the stands, if you've come down from the press box, you'll see a whole bunch of different people from various schools and stuff like that have just come to kind of make a
Casual
day of it,
observers.
casual observers. And I just kind of looked down there and I said, there might be 10 to 20 casual observers here. The rest of them are, the people that are directly connected to those programs. And I'm not saying anything bad about it. It just
No.
didn't give it. It just, like I said, it just did not work in terms of, having, basically somewhat of a program convention where you look down at the stands and you see, 100 different schools represented with various coach shirts, hats, whatever. That did not happen in either Tuesday or Wednesday night. So that made it feel a little bit different just from that little maneuvering. And the crowds just weren't that big, and we knew that was going to happen. It was just a reality of the situation. So it felt a little off, but I felt, considering the circumstances, it was about as good as we could have hoped for in that scenario.
Yeah, and I think there's an element to that that's correct. And I think people underestimate, especially I see this in March when you're down there for basketball, and they have the coaches convention at the hotel. I mean, so there are coaches everywhere. And you also have just casual observers, fans of football, people that live nearby, neighboring towns. That this is what they do on Thanksgiving weekend. Let's take Normal, for example, maybe people from El Paso that saw all the way up to the semis and said, you know what, I'm going to go watch Wilmington finish this off and actually go see this because they can. And it's comfortable to go in there and set it up. And you never know the weather's going to be decent or okay. But I will tell you, for the Wednesday night 7A game, it was snowing at the start of the kickoff at 3:00. And it wasn't letting up. It was collecting a little bit on the ground. And I will tell you that when it snows like that and then the temperatures drop, like we saw, it was getting colder and colder. And about a quarter and a half into that one, I've never done this before, Suze. I said, that's enough. I'm going in the press box. That was enough for me. I gave it as long as I could. I tried to stay down there as long as I could to kind of get the full feel of it. And I stood on the Brother Rice sideline so I could look back at the people. And it's also better for pictures and stuff. Some of you saw it on my social media. But the turf freezes and it's like walking on I don't know what's the best. It's like walking on frost. It just was. It was starting to. It was a kind of a weird feel. And I know that happens in cold games all the time, but you don't experience that at the high school level like this. And that's what was kind of catching my eyes and ears about just how it was. It's hard for any casual observer to stand out in that if you don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. And so I wonder what the TV ratings will be. I'm sure the stream numbers will be very interesting too. 3:00 right in the middle of the workday, and you're getting the email alert saying the game starts in 10 minutes. I'm going to pop that on for a little bit. So I was curious to see what people would say. The games on Wednesday are interesting compared to the games on Thursday. Or I mean, the games on Wednesday compared to the games on Tuesday. And you and I are going to break that down for a minute. But I want to ask you this, because I brought this up a couple times. The idea of just skipping Thanksgiving weekend and maybe experimenting with the format a little bit and say there's a dome in Arlington Heights that can facilitate this sort of thing. What was your general thought on Tuesday, Wednesday football post Thanksgiving with no other football anywhere else? If you're a junkie and you have a comfortable 72 degrees to go sit in, do you think we could see bigger crowds in Arlington Heights? Do you think we could get attendance a little bit higher on television, sort of the ratings, I should say, on television, if they move some of the bigger classes to, say, Monday, Tuesday of the weekend after? Or is there that finite Thanksgiving, finish it, let's move on?
It's such a layered answer. I mean, my initial thought is, I mean, if that was the petri dish for, making that case, I don't know if the answer is expanded crowds.
Nope.
I mean, because it wasn't very well attended. And I mean, for being closer, which is always the complaint with the Chicago area teams, is well, why do I have to drive all the way down to, the middle of Illinois for a game, in this case, especially the 7A game, for two schools that are 4.5 miles apart? I mean, that's, it would be better if we kept this in Chicagoland. Well, while DeKalb is not technically Chicagoland, the crowd was not very good. And I know there was extenuating circumstances.
Sure.
It was the middle of the week, whatever. But, I don't really know what the answer is. You could convince me, to be honest with you, you could make a solid case for me, both sides of this argument, that I would probably nod my head and go, I could see that. I mean, to be honest with you, I just really don't know what the answer is that until, you put it in a bag, shake it up, and see what comes out. Because that's, I mean, I've expressed this many, many times. I'm kind of a traditionalist in a lot of ways. And for me, I'm so used to it being culminated and finished. Like, I was completely out of sorts on Saturday. I did not know what to do with myself. Like, I had been, my body clock and everything in me had been gearing up for 8 games in 2 days. And the fact of knowing that as much as I love it, when those 8 games are over, I'm done. So I have to, I charge my batteries so I can get through those 8 games in 2 days, knowing that the battery will be practically out at the end of those 8 games, but just kind of pacing myself, knowing, hey, got 6 more games to go here, and not that it's a chore, but it is.
No,
it's a toll. I mean, like, I'm not what I was when I was 25 and could ram through 8 games like nobody's business. So it's just one of those things that, when I look at it, it's just kind of what I'm used to. I'm kind of set in my ways on stuff like that. But I could be convinced that, if it was better for everything, I to be honest with you, would be interested in seeing some sort of format that maybe had 7 and 8 in a doubleheader format off the weekend.
Yeah.
Then you still had the Friday, Saturday setup where maybe it was 3 games instead of 4 games. I could really get behind something like that.
And that's something I've pushed for quietly over the last several years. And this was kind of the taste of what it would look like. What I saw, I did not like. And that's okay. That's all right. To me, it's data coming back going, okay, well, what are the factors? Well, it was 30 degrees and snowing at kickoff at Northern, and then it dropped down to 18 at night. I've been to Champaign, and I saw Kalia Butler out there on television on the sidelines freezing her you-know-what off, and I thought, glad I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. But I understand what it's like doing that for 8 games in 2 days, and knowing that at the end of that 8A game in Champaign 10 years ago or 12 years ago, it was 12 degrees out. I mean, I've seen that. You're going to have that. But what if you had an indoor stadium to work with? How does that change it? So I'm just curious, and I'm sure there's going to be some conversation in years to come about how this weekend went and any sort of contingency plan. I thought this was a good lesson for everyone. We got to try some things. There's no reason not to in this stuff. So again, hats off to everybody who kind of pushed the buttons they could to try and figure some things out. And we learned a little bit along the way the last week and a half or so. We're going to switch gears to the actual games because there were some great ones, especially 5A and 6A. We want to make sure we throw our flowers to our state champions in 5A, 6A, 7A, and 8A, and maybe the state champion that didn't win, but that we were all kind of like, good for you as well. This is the Friday Night Drive recap here on Shaw Local.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike. With dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country, we meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
All right, welcome back as we recap the big schools in 5A through 8A and what was a wild state championship weekend, extended weekend, week. I don't even know what to call it at this point as we've moved on for sure. Matt Rodewald, Steve Soucie with you again. Thank you for all of you that's joined us throughout the course of the season. All those coaches and athletic directors and supporters. We know parents. We know the kids watch us. We're just glad that you're supporting high school football and you're just watching us with us because we're just like you guys. We're just curious and in the stands talking, and you and I had conversations at the NIU in the press box and kind of how things were going. And, you know, the fun part about getting to do this is that is the fun part of the low stakes. Yeah, there's reason to play. Of course there, and there's a lot of at stake and intensity for sure, but it's not life or death. It's high school football. That's the fun part about this. And we get to see kids grow up right before our eyes. Yeah,
it's absolutely just one of those situations where, you know, if you just kind of take stock of you know, all that's kind of going around and what is going on, you know, sure, there's a lot of value and anticipation on like what's going to happen on the field, but still, it's just an opportunity to have, you know, athletic competitions at a very high level and getting to see these athletes, you know, that are performing at that level and kind of, you know, in time thinking about, you know, where might I see this guy in 5 or 6 years? You know, stuff like that. It's all just kind of weighing out. And, you know, for me, some of the really fun things about this weekend is discovering players that I didn't know that much about. I mean, the Tolono Unity quarterback just completely opened my eyes in the 3A game. I'm like, I didn't know anything about him. I knew the name.
Neither one of us did.
I wrote down the name when I was doing a little bit of stats analysis when doing a game preview. I didn't know a thing about him. And boy, I mean, I was just wowed by his performance in that game. And then, I was talking with Matt Daniels, the sports editor at the Champaign News-Gazette. I'm like, where is he committed? And then he told me Central Missouri. And I'm like, what is that?
For now.
I don't even know. I don't know what that is. So it was just like,
yeah.
I'm like, I've never claimed to be a talent scout, but there are times when I see something that completely mystify me in regards to where a kid may be going to school, you know, in terms of where I think he should be going to school. That might have been one of the biggest barometer shifts I think I've ever seen in terms of where I thought that kid's talent was and where he's actually going.
Yeah, Central Missouri, Central something. How about Central Michigan? Would like to have him right about now for sure. Let's go from one quarterback to another as we switch over to the 5A game. How about Brock Phillip and the way that went down towards the end of the game, down to the wire? That was a heck of a finish, controversial no less as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you just kind of look at it over the course of the game. I mean, I didn't really even realize it until I was looking in the fourth quarter how much damage Brock Phillip had done. And then it was like, and I was kind of going back to early in the season. I don't really even know that much about this kid heading into the year. So it was just kind of like, well, what's going on? I mean, I went to see Wheaton St. Francis on the first day of available football game season. They played Kenwood on a Thursday night. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know if Wheaton St. Francis can outscore everybody because I think that's what they're going to have to do. And then in reality, it just kind of all played out that way 13 weeks later in the state championship game. I'm sitting there going, I think they need to score here. I think they need to leave as little time as possible on the clock because I'm not sure they can keep Providence from answering this score. So it's exactly what they did. They went through a 6-minute drive where they just kind of ground it all the way down. And I mean, in a matter of interpretation, they successfully ground almost all of it off. You can argue some things otherwise. I don't know. I mean, obviously you weren't there. You were watching on television. My immediate reaction to that was that I couldn't figure out whether or not he was still in the pocket.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to figure out whether or not it should be a grounding call because, I mean, he said he was trying to throw it to Zach Washington. Well, Washington wasn't anywhere near where that ball ended up. So, I mean, I thought a case could be made for grounding. I thought Providence coach Tyler Plants handled it pretty diplomatically and saying,
I agree with that.
I didn't have the best angle on it, but it looked to me like this. So, I mean, it was definitely debatable, but I could see how that call could have gone either way.
Sure. And I'm not going to get on the crew for the call or either way. Nothing like that. It's just one of those like heat of the moment. They don't have the benefit of the doubt of any sort of replay. At least we did because we can watch on television. But you see that in a semifinal, you're not having the discussion that we're having now because you had the ability to watch it a few times and the internet took it in a different direction as well. So it's ultimately it changed the result of the game, but it didn't change the game itself in terms of how it was back and forth and just a lot of fun to watch for sure. I want to switch to 6A because Fenwick did things that I am just still stunned at days later. 600 yards of offense that they gave up with East St.
49 was the official total.
It's an amazing stat. The stat I was amazed with was that East St. Louis only had 9 penalties in that one. So it wasn't an undisciplined football game, but there were turnovers and there were mistakes. And when you make mistakes in normal, other teams will seize upon that. It's the third time we've seen that in 5 years with East St. Louis going down to a team that they probably should have beaten.
Yeah, it was a bizarre beginning to that game with the down punt on the 4-yard line that Fenwick eventually ended up taking in for a touchdown. And it was there were just crazy little elements that were going on. We got through the first quarter and the total offensive total was 174-4, I believe, yardage wise. And Fenwick was leading 7-6 despite having 4 yards of total offense. It was just kind of the whole game. It was kind of like a bizarre setup, but like I'll tell you, early in the game, and it's funny, I exchanged a few messages with Fenwick's defensive coordinator John Grayson, not directly after the game, but like a little while later, and I said, people think I was crazy, but I said that's absolutely the best performance I've ever seen a defense turn in that just gave up 549 yards. And he just laughed at me, but he understood what I was saying because I saw it early in the game. Mason Johnson-Cook is a heck of a football player. Fenwick laid the wood a couple of times early in that game and said, guys, if you're going to do this, you're not going to do it in the way that you're used to. I mean, you're not putting 50 on us tonight. Like, you're just not going to do it. And, they hit, they kept on hitting, they kept on making plays, and East St. Louis answered a lot of those with big plays. But, boy, when they got in the red zone on a couple of really key possessions early in the game, that Fenwick defense really soldiered up and said, you don't have a kicker like we do. You don't have a guy who could drill a 45-yard field goal. We know that. So we're pretty sure that you get inside the 20, you're probably going to go for it. So we're going to try to put you in a 4th down situation that you're not comfortable with, and we're going to try to keep you in front of those sticks. And that worked enough. It didn't work all the time, but it worked enough for Fenwick to grab a foothold in that game and say, hey, we're not letting go of this. And it was one of those things where, I felt like you kept waiting for East St. Louis to make that big play. But
that's the key. And on 4th down, too. I think they were 2 of 5 on 4th down.
You said 9 penalties, but it felt like those 9 penalties came in really bad situations for them. Like where it would put them it would put a 3rd and manageable into a 3rd and long, where it allowed Fenwick to play the safeties a little bit deeper and say, okay, you got to get to the sticks, and we're 5 yards in front of the sticks. So, go there. So there were some things, and Fenwick created those situations. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but when East St. Louis shot themselves in the foot, it felt like they did it at really bad times. And I'm not saying anything about them, but I felt it even in the post-game press conference after the game. I don't think they ever really fully recovered from the punt kneel down in the first quarter. I don't feel like they ever came back from that. I feel like they got themselves in a hole. They did score and answer it, but they didn't tie the game immediately. So they were kind of playing catch up the entire time. And we've seen this before with them. They start slow, and then eventually maybe they get a big play, and it seems to juice them up. Fenwick never let them have that 70-yard bomb, that 85-yard touchdown run.
And on the flip side, I had 2-3 people send me a text the same time with the same joke. Did not have Fenwick running back running away from East St. Louis on my bingo card. That had to be impressive to watch. I wasn't able to see it, but seeing that text told me everything I needed to know about how that game was going.
we were sitting in the press box when that happened, and he broke out, and I heard, I don't know who it was behind me, someone, he's going to get caught, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think he's going to get caught.
Nope.
He didn't. He ended up not getting caught. He's a heck of a player. That's really what it comes down to. I mean, he's a tremendous player. Did a lot of great things for Fenwick on that night. But I don't think East St. Louis looked past Fenwick. I really don't think they did. But it was just one of those situations where it just felt like, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them, it felt like, once again, when they had that unfortunate thing happen to them early in the game, they were never able to get that play that energized them after the fact. They got a ton of yards. They made some big plays, but none of those netted like a 75-yard touchdown run or one of these huge plays. They did have a 55-yard touchdown run in the first half, but even that didn't feel like it drew the oohs and ahs like they like to do.
Yep.
And it's usually their solution to when things aren't going really well is, let's just run a couple of fly patterns. A couple of them will go incomplete, but we'll get one of them.
We'll get one of them.
And that it didn't happen. They were never able to do that. They were never able to put it together and get that little spark that to be honest with you, when they get that, they usually feed on it. It starts, they get that big touchdown, then they're going to stop.
It's an avalanche.
Get it back, and then all of a sudden it feels like this waterfall is just crushing over you. There's nothing you can do to stop it. And they were never able to get that momentum surge that they almost always seem to get.
So we go from a lot of offense to on Wednesday at NIU, which was that 7-8 game was a slog. It really was. An opening drive touchdown for Brother Rice. And then the safety, which I was on the field, and it just did not feel like his knee was down, but it was just down enough, I think. And there's a grimace on the replay you probably saw of the punter going, did I do that? And then the Brother Rice, or I should have the St. Rita punter, and then of course Brother Rice, seized upon the moment too. But it was stuck at 9-0, and it was just back and forth. And Rita can't get anything going, and the weather is getting colder, and by this point, Brother Rice has physically imposed themselves, and Armbruster can only do so much. And he had a couple of flashes there in the second half. They just couldn't get it going, and Brother Rice just imposed their will and got out of there with a state championship.
Well, that defensive line for Brother Rice is absolutely
so
special.
Good.
It's so good,
and they're so.
And that's the first time that I'd seen him on tape, but that's the first time I'd seen Cameron McGee live, and I'm like, is he gonna, after that first series, I'm like, is he gonna make every tackle? I'm like, I'm seriously thinking that is a possibility.
Blew up one screen that was like, oh my god.
So it was just like, 2 tackles for loss in the first series against St. Rita. It's just like, oh my goodness, and he's not the only one. They got other very capable players on that defensive line. It's alarming to think McGee's only a sophomore, but that's an argument for another day. But it just like you knew that it was going to be very, very difficult for St. Rita to get anything going offensively. I wasn't sure it was going to be that hard. It was definitely laborious for them. But to St. Rita's credit, they made things very difficult on Brother Rice too. It was just one of those things where it just kind of felt like, is this drive going to fizzle out? And that was something that you're applying to both teams. I've used this phrase multiple times this season. And this one, I can't think of any better definition than declare it a rock fight. That's just what it was. Yeah.
You've used it a lot. And that was a definition of it for sure. We get to the 8A game, and I don't mean to cut it short, but as we go to the 8A game, I want to make sure we get this in. Sends of flowers to Oswego and Brian Cooney and company. I was so impressed with how they hung around and did what they had to do, and that's the best performance anyone had put on the field against Mount Carmel this season.
Yeah, you go back all the way to the first week of the season when they had to pull that one out against Moeller in Ohio. But regardless, for at least as far as the conscript of how they've been, over the course of this last part of the season, I'm going to be honest. I thought this was going to be a runaway. I really did.
So did I. I thought this was going to be a clock running game.
And I just was pretty confident of that. I know. I hadn't seen Oswego live all season, but I know offense had been, a labor for them in a lot of their games this year. So I was like, I don't know how they're going to score points, and I just don't know how man for man they can stop this Mount Carmel offensive attack. And I'll tell you, they held them almost to a standstill. You look at that final score. I mean, Mount Carmel scored that last touchdown with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. The other two scores in that game, one was directly because of a special teams play, and the other one, the other one was heavily influenced by a special teams play, because the reason that Mount Carmel got the ball inside of Oswego territory at the 43-yard line was because in the series before, when Mount Carmel punted, that was almost blocked. The kid regathered himself and then laid up a punt that dropped and rolled and ended up on the half-yard line. So Oswego had to work out of their own end zone with an offense that obviously has been challenged. So Mount Carmel got the ball there, and it was really their only productive offensive drive of the night until that one in the fourth quarter. They were able to take that 43 yards and go into the end zone for their second touchdown of the game. I mean, without those big special teams plays, I don't know where Mount Carmel's points were going to come from. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, that was exactly the kind of game that Oswego needed to have for them to be in it. So just just imagine in your mind, what if Mount Carmel's special teams plays were just average? Like, what if it was just average? I mean,
and that's why it's a three-phase unit, to have, and this is where the depth of Mount Carmel made a difference. Offense, defense, we know that they have talent. We know there's 1-2 layers, but what we never talk about is that all that depth has to go somewhere. Guess where they get those reps? Special teams. You get kick returns. You get punt blocks. You get all those things to go your way. And Oswego has a pretty good special teams unit. Let's face it. We saw it throughout the course of this regular season. And one thing in terms of the game plan goes, I just want to say the Oswego secondary played out of their minds on Wednesday night, and they should be very, very proud of it. Look, Mount Carmel won a state championship. Hats off to them. 4 in a row. They said, no, you can't play in 7A anymore. Okay, we'll go in win an 8A. There's a lot of talent over there, and there's a lot of good coaching as well. But for Oswego to be a team that nobody expected to do anything, to get all the way there, and then at the end of the first half, have the best team in the Midwest on the ropes for a minute. That's really cool. That's very proud. They should be very proud of them. And so I know the folks in Oswego will regroup, and who knows, you can't put it. It's hard to put these things back together again, but to see the resolve of the Panthers program was really fascinating to watch on Wednesday night for sure. Hats off to them. I was really impressed with just, the teams that were supposed to win did everything that they should do to win, with the exception of one in terms of East St. Louis. That was maybe the only surprise that we saw this weekend, or the whole week, I should say, of state championship action. But if you had to wrap this up with what one thing you learned throughout the course of this season, what would you say?
When you look at it just kind of as a broad overview, I thought the most interesting thing that kind of developed, especially over the last couple of weeks, was, there are a lot of programs that are capable of making, postseason runs and doing interesting things here in the postseason. I was more impressed, especially in the larger classifications, of, everybody can't win a state championship.
Right.
But there were a lot of teams that demonstrated a lot of interesting depth to that conversation. There were a lot of teams that put together really, really good years, and everybody gets all caught up with, well, you didn't make it to the semifinals. There were a lot of programs out there that had really, really good years that were into the quarterfinals, maybe got into the semifinals, or maybe even only got into the second round, that had really good football teams, and maybe they caught a bad break in the bracketing or whatever.
Sure.
But I just felt like this year there were a lot of really interesting football teams out there, and a lot of interesting conversations that were to be had between, two teams that, maybe hadn't played each other in a while, or maybe they did play each other in a while. And, I just thought there was a lot more depth in Illinois high school football. Maybe the upper echelon teams had a bit of a separation from that group, but that secondary group had more teams.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yep. I would agree with you that the year of the quarterback as well, in terms of Illinois talent, we've not seen the kind of talent in this state in terms of signal callers ever before. I will argue this is the best year we've ever seen it. And you and I have been looking at it for 30 years. I know there have been some good quarterbacks that come out of here, but for as many good quarterbacks as we've seen that we think can go on to the next level and do something, we've seen a lot of them this year. Some of them are coming back next year. Can't wait to see you guys, Montini and Carmel, specifically there. But it just shows that the football intelligence in the state is getting better and better and better. And the creativity is also getting better as well, especially we see from the upper class schools. I've seen 6A class schools not just turn into Cary Grove, but hybrid offenses. That's what I think is fascinating. We're starting to see the Ben Johnson effect of just taking this and taking a little that and taking a little that. And I think there's a lot of creativity out there. I just think it's been fun. This was a fun season for sure. It was different. And that old debate of public versus private is not going away anytime soon. We'll get back to it for sure. And we've got a whole off season to talk about that. Soucie, it's been fun. Let's do it again next year. How about that?
Sounds great.
All right. For Steve Soucie, I'm Matt Rodewald saying so long. Thank you for joining us all season long here in 2025 for the Live on Friday Night Drive podcast here on Shaw Local.